HiRez is currently running yet another community skin contest. They really upped the frequency on those a lot, and I think that's a very good thing. Gets a lot of involvement from artists in the community and also gets a larger variety of different artists that contribute something. And we're gonna look at how it looked like this time, because in previous contests we often had the issue that the selection was a little bit strange and a little bit biased. But in the last contest that we had, the Valentine's contest, it was already a lot better. Now with this new one, let's see if they went further in the right direction or if they took a step back by looking both at the finalists that you can vote for, as well as some other contributions as honorable mentions that didn't make it in. The first one that made it in is Full Bloom Amaterasu. This art is by CF Wong 921. I think the art style itself here is great and the image itself looks fantastic for sure. I think there's a lot of visual little gimmicks around the glitter effects and everything and the flowers that give it a very nice vibe. Now, what I'm not so sure about is how well this skin would transition into the game. While the flower ring instead of the shield would still exist in game, I'm not sure what would happen to this translucent sash behind her. I don't know if they would rig a completely new animation for that. I'd be surprised if they did, so that part would probably be gone. And especially when looking at this model from the back, I feel like it would look relatively basic. It would maybe look a little bit more like a tier 2, only that she already has a tier 2. It is a very nice design, but in my eyes it's lacking a bit of uniqueness when transferred into an in-game model. Of course, that also depends on how much work HiRez wants to put into it, but especially all these transparent parts of it might actually not look that nice in-game depending on how it turns out. The next one is Spring Carousel Chiron by Sky Flu Arts. With this one, I'm a little bit torn. First of all, Chiron hasn't had a skin in ages. His last one was in 2017, and that's surprising from the perspective that he shouldn't be super unpopular as well. So I thought HiRez would maybe have given him a skin at this point already. But at the same time, to me, this skin does have its own unique approach to Chiron, but it doesn't differ that much in vibe to me compared to Fabulous Chiron. Of course, Fabulous Chiron is more the over-the-top gay type, but still the same niche in the sense that there's a heavy focus on pink, on purple, and overall a very colorful design here. And what I like when it comes to a selection of skins for a god is a large amount of variety, and Chiron's skins so far fulfill that pretty well. You have this super edgy, dark Hellrider, you have the kind of funny and animal-focused Constable Moosejaw, then you have the wintry, once again more animal-focused but still different enough Sleigh Bells, and then you have the fabulous one, and I feel like the skin here, the Spring Carousel, wouldn't quite fulfill its own niche as much as some others. It's still a unique idea, I think, but I would have liked to see something else, basically. So what I would have preferred would have been a super naturey, druid-like spring theme. That I think is something that Chiron doesn't really have yet, and that would fit in really well here. But again, personal bias, of course. The next one is Lake Fairy Sol by Anolea Nova. I think the skin is decent. It's a skin that just looks nice overall and is different enough from Sol's other skins, but at the same time it's also not a one that would particularly stand out to me or have a completely unique concept either. I think it's good that it takes a different direction from the skins that she has so far. At the same time, Sol has so many skins that I would argue if she gets any more skins, they should be very unique skins that stand out a lot and have a completely different set of effects and everything that kind of gives them a completely different vibe, and I don't think that's going to be fulfilled with this particular one. Also, keep the skin's backside in mind, we'll get back to that. The next one is Fly Pele by Kwamikaze Draws. With this skin, we actually have a situation that I rarely ever see. I personally don't like the base model itself, the design here itself that much. I think it's just, I don't know, not my style. But I like the ideas, the abilities surrounding it and everything. And I think this one is a sufficiently unique concept so that it has a good reason to be in this context. despite me not actually liking the base design. For example, she has magic wings that only appear when she uses her 3 or her ultimate. And additionally, she has these flower field effects around her when she uses her 3. And what I especially like is her 1 actually. She throws out an orb as the main projectile, a glowing wisp orb. And then small magic birds fly back as the damaging projectiles. So I think with a bit of polish on the model here, especially on the face design, this could be a pretty good skin. Lord of Spring Ratatoskr by Juniper Garcia is next on the list. This is a relatively simple concept overall, I would say, turning Ratatoskr into an Easter bunny. His acorn is replaced with a big Easter egg, and a lot of his abilities get additional effects, mostly with the pink petals and confetti effects on the flurry. During his ultimate or special mode, he also grows golden wings. Now, as you may know by this point, I generally really like Juniper Garcia's art, and I think she makes a lot of cool, unique concepts. This one in particular is not my style. It's just too cutesy for me, but that's fine. I'm just not the target demographic for that type of stuff, but I know that there is a niche for those things, and I know that especially League of Legends is a game that got quite successful by catering to this audience as well that likes this cutesy stuff, and SMITE has done a lot of the cutesy stuff since as well. So I can definitely see people voting for this. Next up, April Showers Discordia by Jade Rapid, or apparently just going by Rapid now. This skin in itself is not very spectacular, I would say. In fact, it's less colorful than even the default Discordia skin. And the theme here is really focused on the rain, and I think it's intended to have a bit of a gloomy vibe because of that. But I also think that especially from the back in game, you won't notice all too much of that, and she will look pretty close to standard Discordia. But what this skin once again has is a variety of changed effects, which I think is again very interesting, because that's already what we had with another skin on this list, where the effects actually shine more than the skin design in itself. And that's because the 1 is a water bubble instead, which could be a bit of a problem considering Yemoja already has a spreading water bubble ability. That could be a bit confusing. The 2, which is her root and madness basically, becomes a little flower field where the flowers pop up, which I think looks really cool as a concept. And then her 3 is a rain area instead, basically, with some puddles, with an umbrella, and some boots. So very cute little details here. The ultimate is a sheep, or a ram to be more specific, that when thrown is initially white and fluffy and cute, and then turns really angry and becomes the black sheep. While I really like these ideas, I'm a bit concerned with how this could be executed in game. I think especially the ultimate is simply gonna stay a sheep in one form and not have this transformation, because I think that would require a whole new set of code, as far as I'm aware at least. So the quality of the skin highly depends on how much HiRez would actually put into all the animations for the effects, and based on that it could be a relatively mediocre skin or a really good skin. And from sheeps and rams we move over to lambs, to Spring Lamb Kernunos. It's literally Kernunos as a lamb. This artwork is by Iuna Prime. You can see that the abilities also have a bit of a springy vibe here. Again, you see the flower area for the 2, for the Bramble Blast. The Horn Charge comes with a little bit of a flower bed wherever you dash. And then the Wild Hunt turns the enemies into eggs. I'm not quite sure how the 1 is supposed to be executed here. I can see that the glaive is supposed to be a flower, so I suppose it's a thrown flower that changes with every stance swap. Overall, this concept doesn't really vibe with me, to be honest. I'm not quite sure what it is. Maybe it's the more simplistic art that doesn't really get the message across as well as some other art styles here. Or maybe it's just the lack of anything where I'd see a strong connection to Kernunos. It is, of course, something that changes the character model fundamentally, so that's worth pointing out, but I don't know why. For some reason, I am just not a fan. I will, however, say that there is appeal to the idea of enemies waddling around as eggs during his ultimate, similar to Ram Royale. And speaking of eggs, we have Easter Kuzenbo by Noamoro07, which turns Kuzenbo into a giant chicken with a cracked eggshell on its back that throws Ninikapas as baby chickens, or rather throws them as eggs probably, and then they crack open as well. I think this idea is great. I think this idea is definitely unique, and I think this could look hilarious in-game. The only downside here really is that Kuzenbo just got a really good skin, and I'm not sure if I can justify another Kuzenbo skin at this point, especially since I'd have a really hard time choosing between them. For me personally, in terms of art style, execution, and overall concept, this one takes the cake. There is one more entry though, which is Forest Elder Kumbhakana by Scribble Scruff. And honestly, I actually like this concept quite a fair bit. Of course, with Kumbhakana you have relatively high limitations when it comes to the amount of things that you can change about his kit. You can of course add some flowers here and there and some green effects, but there's not that much you can do. So the work goes into the model, and I do think there are cooler models in the game, or more creative models for that matter, but I think this just hits a sweet spot of something that Kumbhakana doesn't really have yet, and that's a little bit transformative, turning him into an animal, even though he already has a skin that turns him into a rhino. And I also like the replacement of his stuff here. I think this is a bellflower, if I'm not mistaken. So it gives him a unique, different look that can also be combined with some effects, maybe some spores coming out of the flowers when he attacks someone with a basic attack or something. Not an entry that makes me go, wow, I have to vote for this right away with the highest points possible, but something where I think like, yeah, that's just good. And I like this, and it stands out a little bit. And speaking of standing out, let's look at some of the honorable mentions as well. There's one that definitely stood out, which surprisingly didn't make it in, and that's Majestic Queen Bee Amuse Cup. This one was made by SNES, a gender bend skin for Amuse Cup that also has a bit more of a regal theme to it, with pretty good artwork too. I thought that maybe this skin may be a bit too lewd, and that may be the reason why it wasn't chosen. But if you remember the skin that I told you to remember early on, you know that that wasn't the reason, because we actually have a relatively lewd skin in this contest anyways. So I'm guessing the main reason here is that HiRez didn't want to do as much re-rigging work for this contest, and that's why it didn't make it in, because it had a lot of upvotes on Reddit as well, so I don't really see what other reason it would be. Maybe it's the lack of popularity of Amuse Cup as well, I can't say. Then there's a skin that's at least briefly worth mentioning, which is Salt Spring Break by What If You Were a Fish. This is worth mentioning because it got a lot of upvotes on Reddit. I honestly am not quite sure why, because to me this is way too close to just the base model of Sol. To me personally, this is more like a tier 2 kind of concept, just put some clothes on Sol, which, yeah, guess if you're into that, but I don't really know what the appeal with this one was, but I wanted to at least mention it because of the number of upvotes that it had. A skin where I understood the upvotes more was Thorn Spring Hawa by Dave Spectre 122, turning Hawa into a spring that is basically a growing thorn which found an armor in the forest spirit and then used that and walks around like that. I can see why HiRez didn't let this one through, and that's because while this concept looks super cool, the amount of rigging that would be necessary to turn his normal water bottom part of the body into the spring and then animate it in a way that it looks at least somewhat natural when he moves around, it's just going to be too much. You either have to make him move like a snake, or you have to make him bounce all the time while staying at the same height. It's just not gonna work feasibly within the realms of what's possible and how profitable a Hawa skin would be in comparison. And then there's one last skin that I really wanted to mention, and that is Flowerpot Bakasura by Six's Draws. I think this concept was so funny and cool at the same time, and I don't know why it didn't make it in. I love the idea of Bakasura being this kind of like Plants and Zombies style flower pot monster that walks around and still eats things randomly. And I just don't know what spoke against this skin, because I think it's perfect. The only reason that I could imagine is that he already has a spring skin being Feaster Bunny, but at the same time I think the skin is so different that it still would have been more than justifiable to get it in, but that didn't happen. Overall, based on the submissions that I found, I would say the selection that they made for this contest was reasonable, though I would say there is room for improvement, or I would still like some communication when a skin isn't selected that was very popular, at least on Reddit. that we get told why exactly the skin didn't make it in, so that artists also have more of a guideline for the next time they submit an artwork to know maybe these reasons are things that we should avoid, these things are things that we should not implement in our artwork if we want to have a chance at getting in. Because otherwise I really would have liked to see the AMC concept and the Bacchus concept over maybe some of the plain dress change concept that we had in the finalists. But yeah, let me know who you are voting for in the comments down below. And if you're new to the channel, feel free to click the sub button and ring the bell. It really helps me out and it keeps you updated on new videos. And other than that, see you for the next one tomorrow. DukeSloth, out.